If you're shopping for a trolling motor mounting bracket, make sure you watch this video before you purchase one. That way you can get the one that you need for your particular boat the first time. For some reason, this is a confusing item to purchase, so we're going to go over all the different models that we sell and show you how to measure your boat so that you can get the correct one that you need. First off, let's go over the basics. This is the main part of the trolling motor mounting bracket system. As you can see, it has bends on each side to help give it more strength and support, but up here, it does not have that. This is the part that's going to sit on your gunnel of the front of your boat, and you may or may not have to trim this to fit. Don't worry, we're going to do a full install on this and show you what exactly you need to do. This little L bracket right here is your height riser, and it mounts just like this. You're going to throw in a couple of bolts right here so that you can adjust your height either up or down, tighten those down, and that's going to give you a good secure fit. The bottom part of this L with the pre-drilled holes in it is what's going to mount to the deck of your boat. Now, we sell several different mounting brackets in several different sizes, so let's go over all of those. Our standard mounting bracket, which is this one right here, fits most all trolling motors. We also sell a wide version for your bigger size trolling motors that have a wider platform. That's like your Minn Kota Tarova and other larger trolling motors like that. That's what this one is for. You'll notice that this wide trolling motor mounting bracket is a lot shorter than this one, and that is because most of the trolling motors that have a wider mounting surface are not as long front to back. As far as dimensions go, the standard trolling motor mounting bracket comes in at 7 inches wide. The wide one comes in at 9 inches wide. Now, as far as mounting surface goes on this standard trolling motor mounting bracket, you have 20 inches of room from the front to the back of supported area to mount your trolling motor. Then you have an additional 6 inches up here for overhang so that you can adjust this to fit your particular boat. And if you want to angle this a little bit so that your trolling motor deploys more towards the center of the boat, you can do that as well. We'll show you that in the install coming up. For the wide trolling motor mounting bracket, you have 14 inches of supported space here, and then you have an additional 6 inches as well over here, and that is going to be for that overhang, which we'll talk more about later. So not only do we have different size trolling motor mounting brackets, we also have different size L brackets, which is the most important part and the part that most people get confused about. We have an adjustable version, and we have a version that you would actually cut yourself and drill your own holes. This is called the Trimmable trolling motor mounting bracket. Let's go over the adjustable ones first. So with these two bolts installed, you can see exactly how this L bracket system works. This will be the part that mounts to your deck, and this up here will be mounted to your gunnel. Trolling motor will mount up top right here. Now on the adjustable mounting brackets, you have a slot drilled in each one of these so that you can adjust the height, incrementally to fit your particular trolling motor on your particular boat. And we sell these in 3 different sizes. We have a short, a medium, and a tall. Now all of these height measurements that I'm going to give you here in just a second are going to be from the very bottom of this L bracket to the very top of the mounting surface where your trolling motor is going to be. For the shortest bracket that we sell, which we call the short, it is adjustable from a height of 2 5/8 inches at its lowest point to a height of 3 3/16 inches at its highest point. Our medium bracket starts at its lowest point of 3 5/8 inches all the way up to 4 1/4 inches. And this tall bracket could go from a minimum height of 4 5/8 inches all the way up to 5 3/8 inches. So the bracket heights are going to be the same between the standard trolling motor mount and the wide trolling motor mount. The only difference is when you get a wide mount, you're going to get a wide L bracket. When you get a standard mount, you're going to get a standard L bracket, but the heights are the exact same, short, medium, and tall. Now I'm going to show you in the install portion how to figure out which height you need for your particular boat. But if you need an in-between size, you have 2 options. For instance, if your measurement that you need for your boat is in between a medium and a short, what you can do is you can order a medium. The only thing that prevents it from going any lower is the L bracket hitting the trolling motor mount itself. If you're looking at this in the orientation that it will be on your boat, the top of the L bracket is actually hitting the bottom of this. So what you can do is you can take that L bracket and you can actually shave some of this down if you need to, either with a grinder or if you want to use a cutoff wheel, or you can even cut this with a skill saw because this is just aluminum. And that way you can bring this height down just a little bit if you need to. So if you need one of those in-between sizes, that is one option. You can cut this down to the size that you need. But we have an even better option that's infinitely adjustable, so let's talk about that one. And that will be the Trimmable trolling motor mounting bracket, which is essentially the exact same thing as our regular adjustable bracket, except for it doesn't have the holes drilled in it, doesn't have the slots, and it's 8 inches tall overall. If you have absolutely no idea what size you need, this is the one that I would recommend that you buy, because you can make this fit on any boat. And all you have to do to make that work is lay this up on your boat, get this nice and level, and then hold this onto your front deck, figure out where exactly it is that needs to be cut, scribe you a line across the back side of this thing or across the front, it does not matter. And then you can cut this with a skill saw, a jigsaw, an angle grinder, anything, and then you'll have one that's custom fit to your particular boat without having to do a whole bunch of pre-measuring before you buy. This one will just fit everything. And then once you cut it, you will be able to line it up with the mount itself, mark your 2 mounting holes, put your 2 bolts in, and you're good to go. The trimmable version comes in standard and wide. You can get either one. The top portion of the mounting bracket is going to be exactly the same no matter whether you get an adjustable or a trimmable. The only thing different is going to be the L bracket itself. For demonstration today, we're going to be installing this on your very typical 1436 John boat. The very first step you're going to do is you're going to need to find where your boat is level. Now, on every boat, this is going to be different. It's really going to depend on how your boat sits in the water. Now, on most flat bottom John boats, they have this rib that runs down the side. If your boat sits pretty level in the water with that rib, then you can measure level off of that rib that runs down the side. Now, some of these boats will have somewhat of an upward slope to them in the front, and that rib may follow that slope, so that's not a great way to measure where your level is going to be. If your boat has a waterline stain on it, or if you can go put it in the water and actually take a picture and figure out where exactly it's level, that's the best way to tell. That I'm working on today doesn't have a particularly stained waterline, but I can see that the waterline on this one has been pretty close to level with these ribs. The rib is pretty much parallel from top to where the rib is at up to the gunnel rail. So I'm going to take my level on this particular boat off the gunnel rail. The reason that this leveling is important is you want your trolling motor shaft to go straight down into the water once you get this mount on. If you don't figure out where your boat is level, you could have the mount up too high in the back or too low in the back, causing that shaft when it goes down into the water to either be pitched out away from the boat or pitched in, and you won't get the maximum efficiency out of your trolling motor. So that's why it's important to take your time, make sure that you level out the water line on your boat so that we can get this measurement right the first time. So I've got my level up here. It's showing me that the front of the boat is just a little bit high. I'm gonna come over here to the jack, lower it down a little bit, and check my level again. So if you want to buy one of the adjustable brackets, either the small, medium, or large, this is the most important part, is getting this measurement right. We'll talk about the trimmable bracket here in just a second. We're just going to focus on getting your measurement for the adjustable one first. Now, what you can do is put your level up on the front of the boat and then find your level right there. Hold your tape measure up and figure out where exactly this is, and hope that you don't move while you're taking your measurement and get the wrong measurement. This is one way to do it, but it's not the way that I would do it. So just eyeballing this, I'm getting about 4 3/4-ish inches. But let me show you a more accurate way to do this. You can use anything that you find around the house or the garage. I'm just going to use some scrap material that I've got laying around here. This is just some aluminum scrap. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stack this up and see where my level winds up at. So I've got the bulk of it. I'm gonna just start adding some little flat pieces until I can get this thing up to the height that I need. And that looks about right there. So now what I can do, I know that's level, I can take this whole stack right here and I can actually get an accurate measurement on it. So the actual measurement that I need, according to this, is 4 9/16. That was a pretty good bit off from just trying to eyeball it. Anyways, that's my preferred method. That's the way that I would figure out which size that I needed if I was going to buy an adjustable trolling motor bracket. And once you get your trolling motor bracket in, the next measurement you're going to need to take is with your actual trolling motor itself. You can mount this thing however you want. There is no right or wrong way. Personally, I like to have the back of the trolling motor bracket, this black piece that I'm holding right here, as close to the back of this as I can get it. So what I'll do is I'll line them up as close as I can get with my hand, and then I'll see where I'm at up here. Now, this particular trolling motor that I am installing today has quite a bit of overhang from the end of the mounting bracket here to where the actual shaft is. So that's something important that you need to note, is how much space do you need between the end of your trolling motor mount here and where your shaft goes down into the water, because you don't want to mount it too far back and it hit the edge of your boat when you're deploying your trolling motor. So with this particular trolling motor setup, I can actually cut this right here and not have to worry about any clearance issues. Now that I've figured out that measurement and where exactly I need to cut this thing at, I can go ahead and figure out where I want to mount this. And again, you have tons of options. You can go angled like this. You can do a severe angle to where it comes out right here in the middle of the boat. You can mount it here. You can mount it like that. You can do this however you want. For this particular installation, I'm going to go right up here against the gunnel of the boat. It is going to be at a slight angle, and the only thing I'm really going to be watching out for is once I get this thing mounted, when it is in the stowed position, I don't want the trolling motor hanging too far off the side of the boat. So I'll give myself a little bit of room for adjustment if I need it. So now that I know the distance that I need, I'm going to go ahead and make a mark right here across the front of this trolling motor so that I know where I need to cut it. If you got one of the trimmable L brackets, this is how you're going to figure out where exactly you need to cut this thing at. I'm going to put a level up here. I'm going to put this about where I want to mount it, and then I'm just going to figure out where exactly it is level. And it is level about right there. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a quick little spring clamp and put that in place. Double check my level. It needs to come down just a little bit. It needs to go up just a hair. And I'm going to use that to just kind of hold it in place so I can figure out exactly where I want to mount this thing. So I'm just making sure that it's pushed down tight against the gunnel up here. I'm going to check my level, make sure it's good there. And then I'm also going to check and make sure this is semi-level. It's going to depend on your boat. If you have a nice straight area here on your gunnel for this to mount to, then this should be pretty flat. If yours is bent or twisted, you may have to put a shim, a little piece of aluminum or something underneath there to get this thing nice and level. But mine on this particular boat is sitting pretty level as it is. So once I have that, then I'm going to come in and I'm going to mark this just like so. Now with that mark, I do need to go in and account for the thickness of the material because I made the mark on the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put that mark up on top, and then I'm going to put me another mark right below it. I wouldn't worry about this being exact. You just want it to be close. Your height is adjustable up and down just a little. It won't really matter until we actually bolt this together. But as far as cutting this height piece, it does not have to be exact. You just want it to be as close as possible. Now that I got my line marked, I'm just going to clamp this down so that I can get this cut. It is a little bit too big for my miter saw. I have a 10-inch miter saw and it will not fit on there and give it a clean cut all at once. So I'm just going to do this with a skill saw real quick. Now we just kind of set this in place and we'll see how my level is. Right on the money. I am good. The next thing I need to do is figure out exactly where I'm going to cut this. Now I only have so much room on this particular front deck to go back, so I'm going to put this in its furthest back position. Now as far as this rear mounting bracket, you can have it facing out or facing in, whichever you prefer. I'm going to try to get as much room out of this as I possibly can. So I'm going to pull this back as far as I can without it going over the edge right here. So what I'm checking for here is to see how far back my mark is from the gunnel of the boat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this back mounting bracket and pull this up to where the front of that mark is even with the edge of the boat. And that's going to put me about right there. So I'm going to hold that, and then I'm going to try to line this level up with the front of the boat so I know exactly where I need to cut this thing. Now you got to remember this gunnel is round, and if you cut this to the very, very edge of the boat, it's actually going to hang off just a little bit. So I'm going to pull this back to where it is just about to the top of that rounded part of the gunnel, and I'm going to put my mark right there. And same thing we did with the L bracket. I've got this clamped down to my work surface, and I'm just going to cut this with a skill saw. All right, so I'm just going to set this all back up the way that I had it before. And looks like we're going to be good to go right there. I've got enough room to clear the trolling motor shaft from here to here. I've got this angle cut appropriately, and I've got this mounted at the height that I need. We'll double check our level one more time. Looks like we're good. Now there's a couple of different ways that you can mount this to the boat itself. I personally like to use rivets. I use countersink rivets straight across the front here, which you're going to see in just a little bit. You can also do this with self-tapping screws if you trust them. I don't. That's why I like rivets better. If you have a flat gunnel, you can also bolt this straight through if you feel like bolting it. The only thing you have to watch out for with anything other than countersink rivets, if you bolt, screw this in, you just need to make sure that the heads of your screws are not going to be interfering with the place that your trolling motor is actually mounting, because that will cause it to be raised up if you've got a bolt head sticking up or if you have a screw head sticking up above the surface. Another reason why I like the countersink rivets. And that also goes for this back mounting bracket here as well. It's got pre-drilled holes in it. You can use these for and put rivets down in them. That's usually what I do. These are 3/16 holes that are drilled. It doesn't matter if you mount it like this or like this. I always just go with regular standard rivets and rivet it into the deck. You can use self-tapping screws here if you want, if you feel comfortable with that. I've done that before and I've never had any issues. Even with higher thrust trolling motors like 55s and 45s, that hadn't really been a problem. If you feel more comfortable and you have access to the underside of your deck and you want to bolt this in, you're more than welcome to do that. Now, the very last thing we need to do is kind of set this back up one more time, make sure it is exactly where we want it, make sure that it is nice and level, and then we're going to mark our holes here for where this bolt hole needs to be. So now I can go drill these for the bolts that are going to hold this in place. And we do sell a hardware kit as an add-on when you purchase your trolling motor mounting bracket. So if you want to get that hardware kit, it comes with rivets, wood screws, self-tapping screws for putting this in metal, and the bolts that you would need to go in here, which are 1/4 inch. So for 1/4 inch mounting bolts, I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch drill bit. I've already marked my holes. Let's go ahead and drill these out. So one last quick check. I'm going to bolt these in place. I'm just throwing the bolts in here temporarily and just kind of tightening them up by hand so I can check this one more time and make sure everything is the way that I want it before I sand this thing down and paint it. Now, we do offer these in raw aluminum like the one I'm installing today that I'm going to paint myself, or we also offer it in a powder coated version as well. If you want to get it in black, you can do that. Select that option at checkout on the website. I'm going to give everything a good sanding, making sure that I round this over so that the edges are not real sharp. Clean it up with some acetone and then give this a coat of paint. As far as sanding goes, I'm using a random orbital sander. I'm starting with 80 grit and then I'm going to work my way up to 120. Most of this thing's going to be covered, so I'm not worried about it being super smooth. I'm more concerned with getting a appropriate surface for the paint to stick to and making sure all the edges are rounded over so there's nothing sharp that I can cut my hand with. You can go as fancy or as simple with paint as you want. I'm just using a Rust-Oleum self-etching primer over the raw aluminum. I'm going to do one coat, let it dry, put a second coat on to make sure I got good coverage, let it dry for the appropriate amount of time that it says to on the back of the rattle can. And then I'm going to go back with some plain Rust-Oleum professional spray paint. This is just a flat black color. Spray the first coat, allow it to dry, and then put the second coat on, let it sit overnight, and come back and finish up the install. So I let our parts dry overnight, and now it is time for the final install. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bolts and just set the bolts in place for now. I'm not even going to put any nuts on the back of them. And I'm going to put this up on the front of the boat exactly where I want it to sit. What we're going to be doing is installing this bottom plate right here, and you could mark this if you wanted to. I'm just going to hold it in place, move this out of the way, and then I'm going to go ahead and start drilling my first hole. I'm using a 3/16 drill bit, and I just drilled straight through there into my front deck. I'm going to use 3/16 rivets to hold that in place for right now. I'm going to go ahead and get my next one in. Go ahead and throw another rivet in. I'm just using standard rivets. I'm not using countersinks right here. And then I'll come in here and drill these last two. That is in there very securely. I'm not worried about that going anywhere at all. With that done, we can go ahead and set our top plate in place. Next up is going to be just to temporarily bolt this in place. I'm not going to tighten the bolts all the way down just yet. Then I'm going to hold this in place, go ahead and line this up with the top of the gunnel, and go ahead and get my first rivet hole in. Now, like I said earlier, I like to use a countersink, so I'm going to countersink this hole. Put my countersink rivet in there and go ahead and get it secured. Then I'm going to put another one over here on the other end. So then I'm just going to fill the rest of this in. I'm going to start right here about, and then I'm going to put one here. And like I was saying earlier, you don't have to use rivets. That's just my preferred method. If you want to use screws or bolts or however you want to do this, you can do it. Just as long as you feel like your trolling motor is secure on the front of your boat, go for it. But I like rivets. And the last step is just to tighten up our bolts back here. With our installation completed, now we can go ahead and get our trolling motor lined up and bolt in our trolling motor. And one last little detail, I've sanded all the top of these rivets real quick. I'm just going to hit these with just a little bit of paint, cover up all those fresh aluminum rivets on there. So there is the trolling motor mounting bracket installation procedure. It's not a very difficult process at all. You just have to make sure that if you're not going to buy the trimmable one and you're going to buy one of the adjustable ones, take your measurements very carefully before you order it so that you get the right one on the first time. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below, or feel free to reach out to us through email or phone. All that information is down in the description box as well.